All right, class, we're in week 2, module 2, and this module focuses on historical foundations of social welfare in America. So basically, it's a history lesson for you as an advocate and a social worker. Through that lens, you're going to do some of the reading, or all the reading, of chapter 2, and then view the resources, the videos that we have for you on the module page. And the reason why history is so important is because it's really important to understand the context that has occurred within the United States over time that have led to a lot of the social welfare policies that are in place today. So, for example, the Social Security Act was passed in the mid-30s as a part of the New Deal, and that was a response to the Great Depression that occurred in the late 20s, lasting into the early 30s. And so we still have Social Security in place today. So understanding why it's in place and the context around its establishment is important, because really that's one of the programs that has seen pretty much widespread support ever since it was enacted. And so that's one example of social policy. I'm just going to go through the different eras here. And so these are the eras in the book: the colonial period from 1690 through 1800. And the backdrop to this slide is actually a map of the United States in 1800. And so that's early on in the establishment of the United States and the original 13 colonies. And this map really shows that, you know, in the origins, there was still the Native American populations that were in the areas that weren't established as states or colonies. So in these areas here, the territories, and then in the south, and these orange orange areas are areas that belong to other countries. So Canada was a British territory. Oregon was part of the British territory, and then the Spanish territory here went all the way down through Texas and into Mexico. And this is a Louisiana Purchase. So keep in mind that there's tribes in all of these areas. So the tribes at the time really would contest the right of any European group to purchase the land that didn't belong to them in the first place, and the right of another country to sell their land as well. And so these were the early eras. And so the colonial era and the pre-Civil War era in 1800 through 1860, and the Civil War and post-war eras. Those are your times before the heavy industrialization occurred. In the book, it states that the federal government didn't get involved in social welfare. That's not the case. In fact, you know, through the treaties with the tribes, there was aspects of social welfare programs, rations, food, and especially education. The federal government was involved in educating American Indian children and taking on a role of assimilating American Indian people and destroying the culture as well. But we won't get too in depth with that, but I just wanted to note that the federal government was involved specifically with the tribal people. And so this is a map from 1874, and that's the beginning of the Progressive Era. So you can see that by then, all of the territories of the lower 48 states were established. And that's where we see heavy industrialization. We see a lot of factories and manufacturing, and people, a lot of immigration as well from Europe specifically. And people were moving into cities, working in factory jobs. There was a child labor that was going on. And, the agrarian society that the founding fathers had envisioned wasn't exactly unfolding as they had thought, with all of the technological advances and manufacturing, the railroads, and all of those things just created a large boom, I guess you could say, in the economy. But there are also inequities, especially in labor, with child labor specifically. So children were actually forced to work in many cases. And so that all changed throughout the Progressive Era and through the Great Depression is where, and in the New Deal is where, as I discussed, the Social Security Act was passed, and many other programs that we see to this day. And so when we start thinking about this era is the pendulum. So the pendulum swings back and forth in each of these eras, where the social policies and society view that it should be a responsibility of either the government or society in general. And then after that, it swung the other way and focused on more on the individualism, and that people should be able to take care of themselves and government doesn't need to get involved. And moving into the 1960s and 70s, that's where we saw the civil rights era, we saw the war on poverty, we saw desegregation. And so this map on the backdrop is actually a map of the states that required segregated schools, where it was optional. And you can see that Arizona was an optional state. And then the states that forbade segregation, so you see those primarily in the northeast. And some didn't actually deal with segregation in terms of any legislation around the topic. So, read chapter 2 of the text, learn a little bit more about the history of social policy. We have different materials in this module. So we have a video on Frances Perkins, who was the first woman to sit in the presidential cabinet. She was the mind around a lot of the Social Security Act and a lot of the New Deal policies. It was really amazing, really someone, I guess you could say, someone who was a trailblazer and who set an example for future women leaders. We have a video on the New Deal, the war on poverty in the 60s, and also the March of the Bonus Army is a video you definitely want to watch maybe once or twice just to get an idea of what that was. And then your assignments are both on this video, so be sure to pay special and close attention to that. Assignments are due on Sunday by 11:59 p.m. I hope you have a great week and learn a lot in this chapter. And feel free to shoot me any questions if you have any. And have a great week. Take care.